There's a kind of woman you may have seen, ethereal, charming, full of life, but also fragile, unpredictable, always reaching for something invisible. She's magnetic, yet slippery like a dream. You feel her presence, but can never fully grasp it. She's the woman who never grows up, not because she refuses, but because something in her soul is still waiting to be found, rescued, completed. Carl Jung called her the Puella Aeterna, the eternal child. In women, she appears as the Puella Aeterna, the eternal girl. But what does that mean, and why does it matter? Today, we enter the psychological myth of the woman who dances on the edge of time, forever young and forever lost. She was always laughing, not with the heavy joy of understanding, but with the lightness of someone untouched by consequence. There was a softness in her presence, as if the world had never pressed itself too hard against her. Her eyes carried wonder, not the kind that grows from wisdom, but the untouched awe of someone who still believes that all endings can be rewritten. And perhaps, in her heart, they could. Somewhere between her first heartbreak and the birthdays that followed, time decided to pass her by without asking her permission. While others stepped deeper into themselves, gathering scars and responsibilities, she lingered at the edge of becoming, fascinated by the reflection in the mirror, but never quite ready to step through it. There are people like that. People who feel like spring in the middle of autumn. They carry the music of youth long after the notes should have faded. You see them in the way they skip from idea to idea, love to love, always enchanted but never grounded. Their lives are poetry without punctuation, beautiful but breathless. And it isn't immaturity. No, it's something far more mysterious than that. Carl Jung called her the Puella Aeterna, the eternal girl. Not because she is trapped in a child's mind, but because her soul is forever tilted toward the sunrise. She lives in beginnings, in possibilities, in the soft fog of what could be. And while others harden into the shape of adulthood, she remains fluid, elusive, like morning dew that vanishes when you try to hold it. The world often romanticizes her. She becomes the muse, the mystery, the wild one who cannot be tamed. She appears in stories as the free spirit who teaches the tired man to feel again, or the whimsical lover who dances barefoot through life's seriousness. But that's only the part we choose to see, the part we project. Beneath the charm lies a silence, a longing, a kind of homesickness for a home that never truly existed. Because the eternal girl isn't just playful. She is haunted, haunted by time, haunted by the unbearable weight of choice. She is allergic to permanence, not out of rebellion, but because permanence threatens her illusion of freedom. To grow up, in her mind, is to surrender the magic. To say yes to one path is to say no to all others, and that feels like betrayal to the infinite world inside her. And yet, paradoxically, she wants to be seen, to be loved not just for her light, but for her shadows too. But how can you be truly loved if you never stay long enough to be truly known? The eternal girl often attracts deep souls, thinkers, feelers, creators, because she reminds them of innocence, of color, of the part of themselves that once believed. But she is difficult to hold, like a dream remembered too late, and those who fall in love with her often end up loving more of a feeling than a person. The reflection, not the mirror itself. Still, she tries. In quiet moments, she longs to plant roots. She looks at the lives of others, the families built, the sacrifices made, the beauty of growing with someone. And she wonders if she's missing something essential. But every time she reaches for that stillness, her spirit recalls. Commitment feels like a cage, responsibility like a weight. Even self-reflection can feel like a storm too dangerous to enter. She wants depth, but only if she can breathe underwater. It's not her fault. The world never truly taught her how to grow. She was praised for her beauty, her energy, her creativity, but rarely for her courage to endure. We taught her how to sparkle, not how to suffer. And so when life asked her to descend into grief, into patience, into self-discipline, she mistook it for punishment rather than passage. And she fled. She may not even know that she's running. After all, it doesn't look like running. It looks like spontaneity. It looks like a new city, a new job, a new relationship. It looks like reinvention. But reinvention without integration is only a costume. And eventually, the mirror reveals what lies beneath. Sometimes, she meets someone who doesn't try to fix her, who doesn't fall in love with her wings, but with her roots, even the ones she's buried, and something stirs. For a moment, she imagines herself standing still. She imagines being truly known. And it terrifies her, because standing still means being seen, and being seen means there's nowhere left to hide. Yet, this is where the journey truly begins. The mirror that never aged is not a fairy tale. It is a wound, a refusal, a mirror that reflects only the youth we once were, not the soul we could become. And one day, the eternal girl must decide, will she keep dancing with her own reflection, or will she finally step through the glass, into the real, into the risk of being? Growth is not the loss of wonder, it is the deepening of it. It is discovering that there is just as much magic in patience as there is in play. That beauty is not only in bloom, but in harvest. That maturity is not the death of freedom, but the birth of responsibility, and with it, the power to create something lasting. When the eternal girl begins to grow, she does not become ordinary, she becomes whole. Her joy is no longer the laughter that distracts from pain, but the laughter that rises through it. Her love is no longer the thrill of being desired, but the courage to stay. To love even when it's hard. She becomes a woman who remembers her childlike spirit, not to escape the world, but to illuminate it. And so the mirror, once frozen in time, begins to shift. It shows not just the face she wore in her youth, but the face she's earned, carved by truth, by choice, by time. It is not less beautiful, it is more. This is where her story must go next, into the heart of that reflection, into the question she has long avoided. What does it mean to grow? Not away from myself, but into myself. Let us walk with her now, not to shatter the mirror, but to finally meet the eyes staring back. The eternal girl is ready, not to abandon her youth, but to become its keeper. To understand the eternal girl is not to diagnose her, but to recognize her. She lives not just in one woman, but as a thread in many. She is not an exception. She is a possibility woven into the fabric of the feminine psyche. Jung didn't invent her, he observed her. He listened closely to the music of the soul and noticed this recurring melody, the song of a spirit, unwilling to descend into time. A soul caught between the wings of youth and the weight of becoming. The Puella Aeterna. She is the woman who walks through life like a dreamscape. Her energy is light, her imagination vast. She is magnetic, not because of perfection, but because of her promise. She promises the return of innocence, the escape from rigidity, the endless doorways of what could be. But the price of that promise is often a quiet disconnection from the world that others must live in. The eternal girl is intoxicated by beginnings. New places, new people, new roles to try on like dresses. In each beginning, she tastes herself again, unspoiled, uncontained. But endings, or even middles, feel like a betrayal of that freedom. She rarely finishes what she starts, not out of laziness, but because finishing something means committing to a version of herself she may not want to be bound to. So she floats. She reinvents. She disappears and reappears in 1,000 forms. But archetypes are not personalities, they are patterns. They are myths that live in us, waiting to be witnessed. And the myth of the eternal girl has been told in countless ways. In stories, she is the nymph who enchants but cannot be touched, the goddess who stays young while the world ages, the muse who inspires the artist but never loves him back. In real life, she may be the woman who seems ageless, not because of how she looks, but because of how she refuses to land. She has charm, but not always character. She gives light, but avoids heat. She'll smile through storms, not because she's strong, but because she can't bear to stand still long enough to feel the rain. And yet, despite the criticism she often receives, the eternal girl is not a shallow creature. In fact, her soul is often profoundly deep, full of intuition, creative energy, and a longing to experience life beyond its rules. She senses beauty others miss. She can bring joy into a room without effort. She sees the poetry in places others pass by. But she struggles with one essential thing: incarnation. To incarnate is to descend into form, to enter life not just in theory but in practice, to bear the responsibility of choices, of consequences, of limitation. The eternal girl resists this because limitation feels like betrayal to her infinite self. But without incarnation, there can be no integration. She remains a guest in her own life, never fully arriving. Jung believed that the psyche seeks wholeness, not perfection, and wholeness requires that we meet every part of ourselves, not just the parts that shine. For the eternal girl, this means turning toward the parts she avoids: the woman who works, the woman who stays, the woman who carries burdens, who makes mistakes and endures them, the adult self, the one she secretly envies but does not yet trust. Her challenge is not to abandon her essence, but to mature it. There is nothing wrong with dreaming, with dancing, with delighting in life's textures. But when dreaming becomes avoiding, when dancing becomes fleeing, when delight becomes addiction to novelty, then the archetype becomes a trap, a loop, a lovely prison. You may recognize her in women who seek saviors rather than partners, in those who desire adoration more than intimacy, in those who fear being needed, because being needed might expose their own inner fractures. They may crave love, yet recoil from the demands of loving. They may chase spirituality but avoid discipline. They may speak of purpose but never stay long enough to find it. But again, this is not cruelty, it is a wound. Often, the eternal girl was never initiated into her own strength. Perhaps she was overprotected, or praised only for her lightness, her beauty, her sweetness. Perhaps she learned that being small was safer than being seen, that being dependent was easier than being decisive, that being wanted was more rewarding than being whole. Jung believed that healing begins in consciousness, not in judgment, but in awareness. And for the eternal girl to heal, she must become conscious of the gap between her fantasy and her reality. She must ask, who am I when no one is watching? Who am I when the lights go out and the mirror offers no praise? Her path forward is not the path of force, but of invitation. The invitation to ground herself, not as punishment, but as power. The invitation to choose something and see it through, not because she must, but because she can. The invitation to be disappointed and stay, to love and not run, to grieve and still breathe. And she is capable, more than she knows, because beneath her flightiness is a deep sensitivity. Beneath her indecision is a longing for truth. Beneath her eternal girlhood is the seed of a timeless woman. The eternal girl holds a gift that this world desperately needs, the ability to see life not just as a task, but as a tapestry. But the world does not need her to float above it. It needs her to step into it. Fully, not as a symbol, but as a soul. The woman who grows out of the eternal girl is not less radiant, she is more. Her light is not scattered, it is focused. Her love is not borrowed, it is built. Her identity is not patched together from roles and reactions. It is forged in the quiet fire of self-awareness. And when she integrates, when she brings her childlike wonder into her adult wisdom, she becomes luminous. Not in the way that demands attention, but in the way that brings life. She no longer needs to be rescued, because she has become her own guide. She no longer needs constant novelty, because she has discovered the miracle of depth. She is not a girl anymore. She is a woman who remembers, who honors her youth not by clinging to it, but by carrying its light into places only a grown heart can reach. The eternal girl archetype is not a flaw to erase, but a fire to shape. And once shaped, it does not dim. It becomes something else entirely. It becomes devotion. It becomes courage. It becomes the kind of beauty that no longer begs to be noticed, because it has finally become whole. Now, we must ask the deeper question. What does it mean to truly grow, if growth is not just change, but return? What happens when the girl no longer fears the woman she might become? This is where the real journey begins, not toward escape, but embodiment. Toward a self no longer hidden in reflection, but living fully in the light. The eternal girl glows with an almost unbearable softness, but light without weight eventually floats away, untethered. And within her light, there is a shadow she does not yet see. Or rather, she senses it, but looks away. That shadow is not evil. It is not a flaw. It is the cost of living in only one part of herself. For all her grace, the eternal girl carries a wound that whispers beneath every laugh, every disappearing act, every bright-eyed beginning. It is the ache of incompletion. She fears that if she stays in one place too long, one relationship, one career, one identity, she will lose her magic. She will harden, become like the others, dull, weighed down, tired. But what she does not yet realize is that the magic she fears losing is not the result of escape. It is the result of presence. The shadow beneath her youth is not time. It is avoidance. It is the unspoken grief of refusing to meet herself as she truly is. Because growing up, in the soul's language, is not about getting older. It is about walking toward everything she has not yet faced. Her unmet needs, her hidden rage, her fears of being abandoned, of being ordinary, of being real. And it is in this avoidance that her charm can become a mask, a defense, a way of protecting herself from the intimacy she craves. She wants to be adored, but fears being known, because being known means being vulnerable, and vulnerability, to the eternal girl, feels like being trapped, like surrendering the perfect image she works so hard to maintain. She may long for love, deeply, but often she chooses those who reflect back her fantasy rather than challenge it. Relationships for her can become a theater where she plays the role of the muse, the child, the beloved, until reality begins to press in, until real needs arise, until someone asks her to stay. Then the fear returns, the panic, the urge to run. Not because she doesn't care, but because care feels like captivity. But here's the truth she has not yet held close. There is no freedom without form, no flight without ground. The refusal to choose, to commit, to descend, eventually becomes a prison of its own. The more she avoids life's weight, the heavier her soul becomes. Jung teaches us that what we reject does not disappear. It retreats into the unconscious. The eternal girl's shadow is not outside of her. It is the woman she refuses to become. The one who cries in the quiet, who ages in the mirror, who stays when it's hard, who speaks when it's uncomfortable. That woman waits. She is not angry. She is patient. But she is tired of being ignored. Every archetype has its opposite, and integration is the dance between them. The eternal girl's opposite is the grounded feminine, the one who walks barefoot on the earth and knows it will not break her, the one who has faced her grief and did not dissolve, the one who has stopped chasing butterflies and begun to tend the garden. And yet, even this grounded woman needs the eternal girl, for without her, life loses its sparkle. So the answer is not to exile either one. The answer is union. But first, before the union, there must be a reckoning, a looking inward. The eternal girl must sit in silence and feel what she has tried so long to outrun, the loneliness of constant beginnings, the emptiness of perpetual freedom, the sorrow of being adored but never truly understood. She must feel it, not to punish herself, but to finally come home. She must also confront the truth that the world is not to blame for her disconnection. Yes, society praises youth, celebrates lightness, commodifies femininity, but true growth begins when she stops asking others to give her what she has not given herself: grounding, self-respect, inner truth. The woman she is becoming is not the death of who she was. She is the continuation, the flowering. She does not have to kill her wonder to grow, but she must be willing to let it deepen. Let it move from the surface of delight into the depths of presence. She must find beauty not only in what begins, but in what endures. The shadow beneath the youth is not a punishment. It is the root system of the soul. Without it, she cannot bloom. She can only hover. She can only wait for the next thrill to distract her from the ache of stillness. But stillness, uncomfortable as it may be, is the doorway to self. And through that doorway lies everything she has been seeking in all her wanderings: connection, authenticity, peace. And it is here, at the meeting point between shadow and light, that she begins to transform, not into someone new, but into someone whole. She begins to understand that the wildness she feared losing can coexist with devotion. That adventure can live inside the sacredness of commitment. That freedom is not the absence of limits, but the courage to choose them wisely. She is no longer afraid of the woman in the mirror, who has lines around her eyes and a calm in her presence. She begins to see that this woman is not her enemy, but her future. And in that recognition, a new kind of beauty is born. One that does not fade, one that does not beg to be noticed, one that speaks with a quiet power, a gaze that no longer seeks approval, a smile that is not performance but peace. This is where the journey leads, not into more mirrors, but into the life beyond them. A life that is not perfect but real, not effortless but meaningful. The eternal girl, when she integrates her shadow, becomes a force of nature, not by avoiding gravity, but by learning how to dance with it. The next step is not about finding another mask or path to wander. It is about standing still long enough to feel the ground, to hear her own heartbeat, to let the soul grow roots. Not to be trapped, but to belong, to herself, to others, to the present. And when she does, she no longer fears aging. She no longer chases youth like a disappearing train, because she knows now youth was never the goal. Wholeness was, and wholeness is not a season. It is a home. One she carries within her wherever she goes. Now, she can finally stop running, because the girl within her has been met, and the woman she was meant to be is ready to rise. There is a moment in every life when the mirror stops being an object of vanity and becomes a window into the soul. When we look not to admire, but to recognize. When the reflection no longer shows who we wish to be, but who we truly are. For the eternal girl, this is the moment that changes everything, not with a thunderclap or dramatic collapse, but with a quiet sigh, a soft surrender. The realization that running has only led her back to herself. It is here, in this stillness, that the girl she was and the woman she is becoming finally meet. Not in conflict, but in embrace. The girl is not cast aside or scolded. She is held, honored, and given a new place, not at the center of every decision, but as the sacred keeper of wonder. Her laughter remains, but it no longer drowns out silence. Her longing remains, but it is no longer a cry for escape. It becomes a call to depth. This is what Jung meant by integration, not the destruction of one part of the self, but the weaving together of many. Wholeness, he said, is not achieved by cutting off a piece of one's being, but by embracing the opposites and allowing them to speak to each other. For the eternal girl, that conversation is long overdue. She begins to see that time was never her enemy. Time was the teacher she refused to sit with. Aging was never decay. It was the gentle invitation to become real, to belong to the earth, to plant roots, not to be buried, but to bloom in ways that cannot happen when we float forever in the sky. What once felt like a burden, commitment, responsibility, stillness, now starts to look like freedom in its purest form. The freedom to be fully present, to be known, to choose with clarity, to love with both feet on the ground. She no longer needs to be rescued, because she has rescued herself. From illusion, from idealism, from the exhausting need to be more than she is. And in that rescue, she discovers something luminous. She has always been enough. Not because she fits an image, but because she contains the fullness of her being. Light and shadow, playfulness and depth, youth and age, dream and discipline. This is not the end of her magic. It is its transformation. No longer fragile, no longer fleeting. Her radiance deepens. It grows roots. It becomes the kind of light that warms rather than dazzles. The kind of presence that calms a room, not by demanding attention, but by offering truth. Now, her relationships change, not because she is less enchanting, but because she is more honest. She no longer seeks to be desired, she seeks to be seen. She no longer molds herself to fit the fantasies of others. She stands in her own truth, even when it's quiet, even when it's not applauded. And in doing so, she finds a new kind of intimacy, the kind that grows slowly, patiently, through seasons of growth and rest. The kind that asks for presence, not performance. She may still miss the thrill of beginnings, the first touch, the first glance, the first rush of feeling. But she also begins to understand the power of staying, of building, of tending the sacred fire when the spark has cooled. And she realizes that there is a beauty to endurance, a poetry to things that last, not because they are easy, but because they are chosen again and again. The eternal girl becomes the woman who remembers, who honors her youth not by clinging to it, but by letting it flow into something richer. She becomes the elder of her own heart, not in years alone, but in wisdom. She does not resent the passing of time. She walks with it, learns from it, and in that journey, she finds something she never could have imagined during her years of fleeing peace. Peace not as numbness, but as wholeness. The peace that comes when you no longer betray yourself for a fantasy. When you can hold your past with kindness and your future with courage. When you realize that there is no better version of you waiting somewhere out there. There is only this moment, this breath, this path beneath your feet, and that is enough. She is not perfect. She never needed to be. She is real. And in that reality is a strength that no illusion could ever offer. A strength that comes from having faced herself and stayed. From having stood still long enough to see her reflection shift. Not into something lesser, but into someone true. And now, when she looks into the mirror, she doesn't search for the girl she once was. She smiles at her, nods in respect, and then turns her gaze toward the woman she is now. The one who holds both past and future, dream and discipline, soul and shadow. The one who has stopped running. The one who has come home. This is the true gift of growing up. Not the loss of youth, but the reclaiming of self. The eternal girl is not gone. She has simply evolved. She lives now as a voice of wonder within a deeper, wiser whole. And in that transformation, she is not diminished. She is finally complete. So let us not mourn the passing of that endless spring, but celebrate its maturation into something far more rare, a woman who remembers the songs of her youth, but sings them now with fuller breath, deeper tone, and the quiet strength of someone who knows who she is. The girl dreamed, the woman acts. The girl desired, the woman chooses. The girl ran, the woman stands. And in that stillness, in that grounded grace, she becomes something that youth alone could never achieve. She becomes whole. And in the end, that was the journey all along, not to remain untouched by time, but to be transformed by it. Not to escape life, but to live it fully. To love not in the lightness of fantasy, but in the gravity of truth. To grow, not into someone else, but into everything she already was, waiting patiently beneath the surface, asking softly to be seen.